The Uncharted series. What a truly special franchise in the history of gaming. I didn't know back in 2011 when I first played Uncharted 2 Among Thieves that I was going to be sent on this journey filled with incredible stories, fantastic gameplay, and unforgettable characters. There was no telling that this franchise was going to become something deeply personal to me, and that this was going to become my favourite game franchise of all time. But now that I've replayed all 5 of the mainline Uncharted games very recently, I thought I should do a ranking video and place them all in this list accordingly, because I've had some interesting thoughts on each of the individual games, and also the placements of my ranking have changed and shifted a little bit since I last did this. So I thought it'd be an interesting video to go back and do this. So welcome to the channel, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video, and with all that said, let's dive into my ranking of all 5 Uncharted games. Uncharted Drake's Fortune is where it all started, and it gets massive amounts of points for that, just for that alone. Obviously, we wouldn't have the franchise we have today, and I wouldn't have the franchise that is so dear to my heart today without Drake's Fortune. This game truly does kick off a fantastic series. However, the reason why this game lands at the bottom of this list is because it just doesn't have the same level of nostalgia for me personally as the other games do. Fun fact, I didn't actually play the Uncharted games in order. I actually played 2, 3, and then 1, simply because where I was living at the time, Uncharted 1 was for some reason a really difficult game to get your hands on, so I didn't end up playing it until after I'd finished Uncharted 3. So for me, Uncharted 1 doesn't have the same level of nostalgia that I have for Uncharted 2, which is why it does land at the bottom of the list. Also, on this most recent replay of the series where I replayed Drake's Fortune, I did start to feel the game's age. While I feel like all the other games in the series have aged particularly well and have all, can still stand up to other games in the modern era, Uncharted Drake's Fortune doesn't quite have that same benefit. I do feel like this game, from a gameplay perspective, does feel a bit outdated in comparison to the other games in the series and just games in general. And also the story is a bit basic in comparison to the others. It's set in one location rather than being this big globe-trotting adventure like the other games in the series go through. And I also feel like the game can be a little bit boring and a little bit repetitive here and there, given the lack of diversity in the gameplay. It's all very much go from one area, have a shootout, go to the next area, have another shootout, then maybe have a puzzle, and then another 5 shootouts. The game doesn't really have as much variety as the other games, and while I feel like this game was a fantastic foundation for the series and introduced us to the incredible characters of Nathan Drake, Victor Sullivan, Elena Fisher, and also a really good villain in there, I don't really feel like the villains in the Uncharted series are particularly amazing, and in this game I don't really feel like they are top tier Uncharted villains, but characters like Eddie Raja were particularly memorable, and I feel like this game does have a lot going for it. I think there's so much nostalgia and memories embedded into this game for so many people, but for me personally, I just don't have that same level of nostalgia for it as everyone else, and that is why it lands at the bottom of my list. Coming in at number 4 is Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. Now, obviously I said that I'm only including the mainline Uncharted games here, and while this is technically a spin-off of the Uncharted series, I still consider it a main game given the fact that it was on the PS4 and was still a fully released game. And to be fair, even lengthwise, this is about the same length as Uncharted Drake's Fortune, maybe even a bit longer, so therefore I am considering it as part of the main series. I do feel like The Lost Legacy is a real underrated gem among the Uncharted series. A lot of people don't talk about this one simply because, again, it's not really part of the mainline series. It is essentially a spin-off as it doesn't star Nathan Drake. But I think what people overlook about this game is how incredible it really is. I mean, from a gameplay perspective, it completely takes everything Uncharted 4 did and continues to ride that wave, and that's not a bad thing. The gameplay in Uncharted 4 was so seamless and such a huge step up from everything else we had seen before, so to continue doing that was not a bad thing. Also, to completely focus on the character of Chloe Fraser was a great choice because Chloe is such a fan favourite character, we all adore Chloe, and the fact that she was missing from Uncharted 4 was a huge missed opportunity for me, so I loved catching back up with her, seeing what she was up to, and seeing what she was doing in her life since we saw her in Uncharted 3. And I also think bringing in Nadine Ross again, showing a different dimension to her character, adding a bit more depth to her, and showing that she had suffered some consequences following A Thief's End, I thought was a really nice touch. Also, I really enjoyed the separation of this game. It didn't feel like it was part of the series because it didn't have those other characters in it. And while I did miss those other characters, it did make this game feel different. The setting was also beautiful, going to India, and even though this game does have a bit of an Uncharted 1 feel in the sense that it is pretty much set in one location, There's so much variety in India that you're really able to explore these different environments, and it was really beautiful to see. And the puzzles are incredible in this one. Such big scale and creative puzzles that very much reminded me of a lot of the stuff we got in Uncharted 2. And I also feel like, again, the gameplay is absolutely solid in this one. We got a lot of really cool new weapons in this one, and the music is great. I just feel like the Uncharted The Lost Legacy is really underrated and also has one of the stronger villains of the series. I think Asav is a really compelling character and really strong villain. While he doesn't have enough screen time for my liking, I do feel like he does really chew up the scenery when he's there, and he really engaged me as a character. Even though we didn't get enough of him, I was completely engaged with him, and I would love to have seen more. So Uncharted The Lost Legacy, I think, is a great entry in the series and truly underrated. It just, similarly to Uncharted 1, doesn't have that same level of nostalgia for me, so it does fall here on the list. But because of the incredible gameplay, it puts it above the first game. Coming in at number 3 is Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception. Now, this was probably the most interesting one for me to go back to because I was very, very surprised at how my opinion had kind of changed on this game. While I still love it and I still consider it to be one of my all-time favourites, it did go down a few pegs for me. But starting off with the positives, I do think Uncharted 3 has an incredible setting. Even though it is globetrotting for the most part, I really love the game when it's set in Arabia. I think that was such an interesting choice. It was so beautiful, especially the sand, you know, and all the dunes and stuff like that. It was just a stunning, stunning setting. And for the PS3 back in 2011, it was a true graphical showcase. On top of that, I loved what this game did with Nathan Drake. It added a lot more depth to his history and his backstory that we hadn't explored yet, and it started to hint at some more history with his character that we didn't really know of before. On top of that, it also added more history to Victor Sullivan and how him and Drake met. We got to see those through the flashback sequences that we got to play, and they were great for fans as we really got to explore Nathan Drake more as a character and as a person. I also really enjoyed the massive set pieces in this game. Uncharted 3 by far has the biggest and most outlandish set pieces of the series, whether you're talking about the burning French chateau, or the sinking ship, or the, of course, famous crashing plane sequence. There's just so many incredible moments that are just breathtaking, and at the time, the fact that these were gameplay and not cutscenes were actually unbelievable. And playing those sequences are just unforgettable moments that I will never forget for the rest of my time as a gamer. And I think that Uncharted 3 has so many moments like that that just truly capture the action movie spectacle that Uncharted has become known for. But going over to the negative side of Drake's Deception, I do feel like this game has some pacing issues. I do feel like that this game does suffer from a lot of slow pacing here and there, and just some chapters that I don't particularly care about. Like, for example, all the stuff that takes place in Syria in this game, I just didn't care for. I feel like that sequence in the game is literally an exact repeat of the 2 chapters you do before in France, but just in a different location, and far less interesting because you've already done it, and also a far less interesting setting, as it doesn't have the big set piece that the French chapter had. On top of that, I do feel like, even as incredible as the boat chapter is, I do feel like it's a bit of a sidetrack. I do feel like we go there for really no reason. They kidnap Sully just to have us go to this boat, and it does feel a bit silly, and we have to deal with these pirate villains for a short while. And again, I just didn't really find myself as invested. It felt like a bit of a sidetrack when we really should have been going after the Atlantis of the Sands. And then finally, the sequence after the plane crash, which is arguably, you know, the photo finish moment of the game, and like that's your money shot right there. You have 10 of the most agonizing and slow minutes I've ever experienced in the history of gaming. Having to walk around the desert, as beautiful as it looks, and that's the only thing that saves it. It's just so boring, and I get that it's supposed to be cinematic, and I get that it's supposed to be, you know, further cementing Uncharted as this movie-like experience, but that doesn't necessarily work in a game. It works in a film, but not necessarily in a game. Having to just stroll around this desert for 10 minutes, it's just not entertaining. It's not fun, and it just completely slows down the game from an incredibly exciting chapter you had just a few moments earlier to this incredibly slow part, arguably the slowest part in the game. But overall, I do think Uncharted 3 was a great entry in the series. I definitely think it gets a bit too much hate for what it actually is. I do feel like it's still a great continuation of the series. We got a lot of great backstory stuff, we got some awesome gameplay throughout it, and we did get some awesome character moments too. I just feel like that this game is lacking in regards to its pacing, and it does have a few irrelevant parts in it, but it does make up for it in other areas, such as the music, which is in my opinion the best of the series, and also it just has some incredible villains. I really enjoyed the villains a lot more this time around, which I never really appreciated them as much before. But Marlowe, I thought, was really great, and this whole idea of this secret society that's been around for years was something I never quite appreciated before, but seeing it now, I really grew to like it. Talbot's fine, he's basically just there to fight at the end, but other than that, the music makes up for the shortcomings, and I do feel like the villains do also, and I really enjoyed the treasure of this one. You know, I think the Atlantis of the Sands was really cool, really unique, and when you're actually there in the finale of the game, it's this beautiful location that I loved exploring, and I just feel like this game is very underrated among the Uncharted series. I do feel like a lot of people give this game a lot of stick, and I don't think it necessarily deserves it. Even though it did go down a couple of pegs for me on this replay, I still adore this game, and I still think it's incredible through and through. So my runner-up for this Uncharted ranking is Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. And honestly, it was very, very close to putting this game at number 1, and the reason why it wasn't, and I'll just get my only negative for this game out of the way first, is that similarly to Uncharted 3, I do feel like this game does have a couple of slow moments, particularly the moments where you play as young Nathan Drake. While I really enjoyed the young Nathan Drake flashbacks in Uncharted 3, in Uncharted 4, I do feel like they were very boring, and even though from a story perspective and a character perspective, I loved what they added to Nathan Drake and finding out more about his past as a childhood and how he became Nathan Drake, I loved all of that. From a pure gameplay perspective though, I just felt like these chapters were really slow and really boring to play. And other than that, I do feel like the game is pretty fantastic pacing wise. It's just those couple of chapters where you play as Nate as a kid, they just didn't do it for me. Story wise, yes. Gameplay wise, absolutely not. But besides from that, this game was an incredible ending, and possibly the best ending I could have asked for my favourite video game series and my favourite video game character. I just feel like that Uncharted 4: A Thief's End completely understood why people love this franchise and also what they were looking for. I feel like after the first 3 games in this series, where they were pretty swashbuckling adventures, as a good way of putting it, and a pretty good pirate link to this game, I do feel like this game really needed to mature a little bit, and Uncharted 4 did that. It really grounded the series, and it made Nathan Drake a lot more of an adult character, which was a real step in the right direction for this series, because I do feel like a lot of people were looking for that. I feel like after 3 games of these mystical treasures and stuff like that, it felt really refreshing and really nice just to have a more mature story with a treasure that didn't have this mythical, magical twist at the end. And I really appreciated that. Also, character moments were incredible in this game. The introduction of Troy Baker as Sam Drake was a character that I didn't expect to become so intrinsic to the franchise as he did so quickly. I feel like Sam Drake was a character that came in out of nowhere, and while I don't particularly like Sam Drake, that's not necessarily a slant on the character or the writing, because I believe you're not really supposed to like Sam. I think after the reveals of him in this game, I don't really feel like you're supposed to like Sam all too much. But Sam became such an incredible character so quickly and so intrinsic to Nate as a character, and that I really appreciate. It's just a testament to Naughty Dog's writing. If you watch my video on The Last of Us Part 2, I constantly talk about how great they are at writing character, and I feel like Sam Drake is another great showcase of that, because he's such a new character. He's one that the fans, really shouldn't have taken to as quickly as they did. Because he's this new character. We want to focus on Elena, we want to focus on Sully. We don't really want to focus on this new character in the final entry, but the fact that they brought him in, he was such a prominent role, and fans still was able to take to him whether they liked him or not, I think was incredible to see. And the other characters, Elena in this game, I loved what they did with her. I think that she was just an incredible piece of sort of drama here, because she has this conflict inside of her about what kind of life she wants to live, and her conflict with Drake. Seeing her and Drake officially married in this game, at the beginning was beautiful. It was just a nice little, tying of the knot, quite literally, and it was really nice to see that. And seeing Elena kind of come round at the end to help Drake out, even though she was very resentful of Sam as well, I thought was a really, really interesting piece of conflict between Nate and Elena. Sully also, I really enjoyed in this game. Now that Nate had retired for 3 years, I thought it was really interesting to see Sully almost be very protective of Drake. We'd seen Sully be the almost, father figure for Nathan Drake. He's always been that. In Uncharted 3, we got a few moments like that. But here in Uncharted 4, he really didn't want Nate to get back into the treasure hunting game. He didn't want it. He wanted Nate to just be with Elena and be retired forever. And he and Sam didn't really get on. And I thought that was interesting. You know, they kind of had history together and they didn't really trust each other, and he blamed Sam for getting Nate back into it, and I thought that was, again, an interesting conflict between those characters. And it even led to the first time ever in the franchise history where we saw Nate and Sully have a borderline argument, and I thought that was heartbreaking. You know, I felt really awful when Nate almost had to send Sully away. I didn't like that at all, but again, fantastic writing from Naughty Dog. And gameplay-wise, this game completely revolutionized the franchise. I mean, it just took everything the franchise was good at and just smoothed it over. It was such an incredibly smooth experience. It took a lot of points from The Last of Us and really brought that into the game. And what this one really introduced, which I never knew I needed, was the rope. The rope was just an incredible piece of traversal technology that allowed you to just explore these different locations to new heights and new depths. And it also added another layer to the combat, as you were able to swing around these big open areas and take out enemies that way. And again, it just made it so much more interesting as it added so many more possibilities to action scenes. And the set pieces are some of the biggest in the franchise here as well. You know, when you have the massive bike chase in here and the convoy chase and everything in Libertalia at the end, it's just huge scale. And the villains in this are quite possibly the best in the whole series. I've already spoken about Nadine Ross, and she's great in this, even though I think she's a lot better in Lost Legacy than she is in here. She's still a great villain here. And Rafe Adler is, in my opinion, the best villain of the series. Rafe had a really personal connection to Nate. He was a very spiteful, very bitter villain, and also a very dangerous one. Even though he doesn't have as much of a dangerous looking physique or presence as, say, someone like Zoran Lazarevic, he's still incredibly dangerous in his personality, and that I really liked. And the final boss fight between him and Drake, yeah, it's a little silly, but I think it actually really works for his character, that he's so obsessed with this pirate fantasy that he's almost willing to, you know, do this sword fight with Nate at the end for the honor and the glory. I thought that was really great. And I loved all of that stuff in Libertalia. The pirate treasure was great. Even though I said my favorite treasure in the series is Atlantis of the Sands, I love the Libertalia and Captain Avery treasure. I think it's just a really interesting story. Like, it's actually really fun when you're going through and you uncover what actually happened there. I thought that was really incredible. And graphically, this game is one of the best games I've ever seen. It just looks stunning. You know, Naughty Dog really know how to get the best graphics out of a PlayStation console. You know, we've seen that recently, even more so with The Last of Us Part 2, but Uncharted 4 at the time was just absolutely breathtaking, and it still is today. It still completely holds up. And like I say, I think Uncharted 4 was just a beautiful, beautiful send-off. The ending, I was really worried about. I was scared they were just going to kill off Nathan Drake or something. But giving him, actually making him settle down and have a daughter was beautiful, and I think it adds so much more meaning to the ending, and it's just full of nostalgia. You know, it really gets your emotions going if you're a fan, and I cannot wait to see what they do with this franchise in the future. Rumor has it Sony has set up a new studio in California to continue the Uncharted series. I would love to see them bring back Caitlin Dever as Cassie Drake and to do a series with her. And, you know, I think that is the right way to go for the franchise. You know, definitely leave it a good few years, but I think by the time we get there, I think it'd be well overdue. And I think that this is just a beautiful send-off and ending to Nathan Drake, but a new opening for a new franchise and a new hero. My number one, though, has to go to Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. Now, I'll just say it straight up, you know, this most recent replay project that I did on my PS4 just before the PS5 came out, I did it because I wanted to replay all of my favourite games of all time. That included the Uncharted games and also a few others. And I wanted to decide what my favourite game of all time was officially. And Uncharted 2 Among Thieves is what I had always known as my favourite game of all time, but after replaying it, it completely secured it. This game is just perfect, in my opinion. What this game does, it just was a huge step up from the first. You know, when you see the first game in comparison to this, it's just night and day. It's incredible when you look at it. And that is why I feel like Uncharted 1, while it has aged and doesn't quite hold up today, Uncharted 2 completely does. And in a lot of ways, I feel like Uncharted 2 holds up even more so than Uncharted 3. And that's quite an achievement, given the fact that the game were 2 years apart. I really enjoy Uncharted 2 thoroughly. I just think that the game is non-stop bombardment of action, and in a great way. I feel like this game just never lets up. It never slows down. I mentioned how in Uncharted 3 and Uncharted 4 there were a couple of segments that kind of slow down the game for me, or that I feel were kind of sidetracked. This game does not have that problem. The pacing in this game is absolutely breakneck, and it's perfect for this kind of game. I think it works so well. And what I love is, unlike Uncharted 3, which kind of globe hops and you don't really get to participate in the globe hopping, it kind of just takes you to different locations. What I like about Uncharted 2 is every location you go to, you kind of play the journey. So you kind of feel more invested in that journey and how you got there because you played it. You know, you have the famous train sequence of this game, which is truly breathtaking and so much fun to play. And not only is that just an incredible piece of gameplay, but you're also playing the transition as you're going from Nepal to Tibet, and you get to play that journey, and that was really phenomenal. And it does deliver some incredible gameplay moments as you have Nate hanging over the cliff, you know, hanging from the train. That was beautiful to watch. And this game also introduces Chloe into the series, which she was just a absolutely fantastic character, and this is definitely her best game. Well, besides Lost Legacy, of course. But in the mainline series, this is definitely her best game. I think she's got a great dynamic with Nate. I loved her banter with her, and also her banter with Elena was really funny. You know, kind of like the two love interests going back and forth, I thought was really entertaining. This game also has incredible villains. Even though I do feel like Rafe is the best villain, I do feel like Lazarevich is also really up there. I think he's just a really scary, really intense villain. Yes, maybe a little on the generic side because he is just a big Russian bad guy, but I do love his intensity and I think he really nails it. And that final boss fight with him, he becomes very scary and you can just see he has no limits. And also this game does have Harry Flynn as well, who I don't really see him as a villain, so I don't really see him as my favourite, but to be honest, if he is a villain, he is probably actually my personal favourite villain in the series. I think he's so funny, so endlessly entertaining. It's his banter with Drake, it's his Britishness, it's his jokes. I think he's just so entertaining and so funny. I'm so sad he died in this game because I would have loved to have seen him come back in the future, because I just think he's just such a memorable character, so funny, and I never get bored of him. So I do kind of wish he would have stuck around, but this game just has incredible characters like that. Also, what this game adds with Sully, you know, even though Sully isn't as prominent in this game as he is in some of the others, I still feel like he has a great role here. And again, this game is a lot more about Chloe and Elena, and I do feel like that was a really smart choice to play those two off of each other. This game also introduces Tenzin, who's just a really great character too. Even though he's only in this one, I do feel like his relationship with Drake is one of the most unique and interesting in the whole franchise. Same with Carl Schaefer, who's also a great introduction here. And going after Shambhala was a really great treasure. It's just this beautiful, stunning location. When you first arrive there and you're just looking around this environment, it's incredible how they created this. And even though it does have this mythical twist, obviously with the Chintamani stone, and you have, you know, those protectors and those guardians of Shambhala, it really actually kind of works for this particular game, and I think it works really well. And seeing like the fear of Nate, you know, actually really scared of like these guardian creatures, I thought was great. So much so they even scared Lazarevich, which you didn't think anything could scare Lazarevich, but these guys do. And that was great. And I just feel like Uncharted 2, it just never lets up. It's so entertaining the entire way through. Gameplay wise, it completely upped the first game. And still today, I feel like this game might be a bit better in the gameplay department than Uncharted 3. I feel like Uncharted 3 almost added this kind of more stiffness to the gameplay, whereas in here it felt a lot more fluid and smooth. And I feel like that this game, it just added so much to the gaming industry. It really showed what games could be. And I have a real personal connection to Uncharted 2, as this was the first game that really opened my eyes to gaming. Even though I'd been gaming for a few years before I played this, Uncharted 2 was the first game that really shook me and said, hey, this is what games are, this is what games can be, and it really kicked off my journey to become the gamer that I am today. And that's why Uncharted is so special to me, is this game in particular, it really just hit me hard and said, wow, this is what gaming is, and I didn't realise that before. I didn't realise the potential that gaming had to be this incredible experience, and this game does that. And I think that that is why it's so special to me. And it really started my love for what became my favourite video game series of all time, and for Nathan Drake, who became my favourite video game character of all time. I just feel like Uncharted is absolutely unforgettable, and Uncharted 2 in particular really nailed home this series and really shook the gaming industry into something new. And I think that was really impressive and completely unforgettable. So that is why Uncharted 2 Among Thieves has to be my favourite game in the series, and thus my favourite game of all time. So there you have it, guys. There's my personal ranking of all 5 mainline Uncharted games. I know this video is very long, but as you can tell, I have a lot of love for this series. It's my favourite of all time, and I've always wanted to make a video on the Uncharted games to talk about them, and given the fact that I did replay them, all 5 of them, very recently, I thought this would be the best time to do it, right before PS5 comes out. As of recording this video, I do actually have my PS5, and I have been playing it for a few days. I have actually got a first impressions video coming up for it very soon, so make sure you stay tuned for that, and I'll be doing plenty more PS5 PS5 videos and PS5 content over, you know, the rest of this generation. But if you guys did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it. I really put a lot of effort into this one because I just love the Uncharted series so much. And if you want to see more gaming content like this, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any uploads from me. And I hope to see you guys again next time.